Writer's Way Solutions presents Think Like a Molecule by Chuck Champlin. Join host Mia Thompson as she chats with Chuck Champlin, author of Think Like a Molecule. How can the tiniest building blocks of life inspire creativity and big ideas? Let's explore.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Champlin. It's me at Thompson. Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Okay, Mia. Well, my name is Chuck Champlin, and I am a journalist. Just in full disclosure, I'm going to be 75 years old this year. I live in Yuba, California, but my father was an executive of Time and Industries, and so I've lived in a number of places. I was born in Chicago, and I've lived in Denver, and White Plains, New York, and Pacific Palisades, California, and London, England. But at that point, my dad got a job at the Los Angeles Times, so we moved back to Los Angeles, and I did most of my schooling in Los Angeles and in California. I attended the University of California at San Diego, and then graduated from Berkeley. I have a degree in English. I have also been working as a writer and a journalist. I worked at the Los Angeles Times myself as an editor. But then once I retired, I also worked at the Walt Disney Company for 12 years as a corporate communications executive, and helped with the opening of Disneyland Paris, and also was a corporate communications executive at Disney Consumer Products. Anyway, so I retired from actually the University of California at Santa Barbara. I was in corporate communications there and retired in, I forget the year, 2017, I think. Anyway, but during that time, I started writing books, and I've written two books the first one is called Think Like a Molecule, Seeking Inspiration in the Structures of Thought. And then I have written an earlier book called Wand, which is the power of a pen and a pencil. Anyway, so I'm an author and retired, and I have 4 children. And
Okay.
I'm very happily married to my wife, Leslie.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much, Chuck. Now, let me start with the first question. What inspired you to write Think Like a Molecule?
Well, it's one of my favorite questions, because my inspiration was really my mother, Peggy Champlin, and she was a chemist and actually got a doctorate degree in the history of science. But when I was 7 years old, she put a bunch of sugar, stirred it into some water, and boiled it away to reveal that even though you couldn't see the sugar in the water because it dissolved after the water was boiled away, there it was on the bottom of the pan. And so that, as I say in my book, Think Like a Molecule, that was one of the things that inspired me to be thinking about molecules and about thinking down into the inner structures of matter.
Okay. Now, the title suggests a shift in perspective. Now, what does it truly mean to think like a molecule?
Well, it really means that you are learning to think about the structures of things. And now you can look at the way a car works while you're realizing that the gasoline is blowing up inside of cylinders, or rockets are burning material to send it up into space. But even what's going on in plants, you think of the roots, the seed that gets moisture into it, and then the moisture energizes the DNA of the seed, and the seed produces the sprout that reacts with the sun. So it just teaches you to think about the physical things that happen in the world, and that includes planets rotating around our sun and the moon rotating around our earth. You just start to understand the physical nature of matter and of the universe in which we live.
Okay. Now, how can molecular structure serve as a metaphor for human thought and creativity?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, because when I talk about a molecule of thought, it essentially looks like a twinkle that Tinkerbell sprayed behind her when she flies over the magic castle at Disneyland. And of course, my imagination is very much inspired by my time at Disney. But each one of those twinkles looks like a little star, a cross-hatched little star, very much like an asterisk that you might use to say, hey, there's more information at the bottom of the page. So the asterisk is sort of a great metaphor. So it's just, the molecular structure suggests there's a lot more to the world than meets the eye. And so thinking like a molecule means think about what makes up the world, the way it works.
Okay. Now, I understand at the same time. I like the idea because the universe, it follows patterns and molecular structures, biological systems, and even human behavior. And understanding and working with natural patterns, it could lead to a better decision making and creativity as well. So, aside from that, can you share an example of how thinking like a molecule can lead to innovative problem solving?
Well, I think the simplest way I can explain that is when you have a molecule of possibility, once again, a twinkle, a star, an asterisk, you hold that up and say, we are looking for a solution to a problem. I might say to my wife, let's think about what house we might like to live in for the rest of our lives. So, of course, we start taking that question, that thought, that possibility, that inspiration, let's move to a new place. Well, then you start breaking it down into all of the things, all of the issues. Do we want to live by a river? Do we want to live on a mountain? Do we want to have a big garage? Do we want room for our children? So there's a million factors that will go into you making your decision, but you start with that one molecule of possibility. What are we going to do? Where are we going to live? And just like I detail in my book, Think Like a Molecule, a twinkle, an asterisk, that molecule of a thought is something that can be broken down into really an infinite number of portions, just the way there are all of those vertices, all of the lines and spars. I call them data spars that make up a twinkle. And I detail that. I show it geometrically with an illustration in my book, that this sparkle, this star burst, is full of lines of meaning. And so as you think to yourself, I'm going to write an essay that says why my professor was the most brilliant professor anybody could ever have, well, you're going to start lining out a whole series of points that you want to make. And those are, each one of those is a data spar in the concept of your molecular image of what makes my professor so great, or whatever else it is, what makes the house that we're going to buy, everything that we could possibly want to be.
Exactly. Now, how can this concept be applied in fields like science, technology, or even personal development?
Well, any one of these things, science especially, but personal development especially, you may say to yourself, what do I want to be when I grow up? Every child at some point or other is dealing with that kind of a question, or their parents are urging them to think of it. So every one of those possibilities can be broken out. I say in my book, too, it's very much like writing an essay. As you start to think about what essay you want to write, or what do I want to be when I grow up, you're going to start listing points that you want to write into that essay. And so that is the point of thinking like a molecule, breaking the molecule of thought about what are you going to be when you grow up, breaking it down into a lot of possibilities. And frankly, the entire scope of that topic, it may be, again, in a Disney kind of a moment, you're going to see a burst of the single star that's your question, what are you going to be when you grow up, bursting into all sorts of possibilities, a possibility of a truck driver, possibility of a professor, possibility of a space explorer, whatever it is. And each one of those will be a twinkle of deserving description of your thinking as you ponder what are the implications of those things I'm considering. And so it becomes a structure, almost like a forest on a hillside, but more like a series of stars in the sky that you're using to enumerate the ideas that you have in your imagination and your your workman-like process of thinking through the possibilities of what it is you want to be when you grow up, or what am I going to do as I go on my vacation to Venezuela, or whatever else it is. Each one of those creates twinkling stars of possibilities, and each one of them you can zero in on it and say, I'm going to go to Venezuela. What's it like at the beach of Venezuela? And you zoom down into a particular topic that you want to look at.
Yeah, it's truly different, even in my end, if you gonna stay like curious, like asking what if, it could, lead to groundbreaking discoveries and innovations at the same time. Now, how does understanding... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that a scientist, of course, is looking at this planet Mars, or the moon, or is looking at an amoeba under a microscope. Any of these things where your attention is focused can then explode into an entire world of topics and points of view and descriptions and data. That makes sense to a scientist, but in personal development, you're thinking in terms of what kind of money am I going to need? You start breaking out all the topics that are important to talk about to realize your vision.
Exactly. Because, science and progress happen because of questions, exploration, and an open mind at the same time. So, aside from that, aside from that, Chuck, how does understanding molecular behavior help us better understand collaboration and connectivity in our own lives?
Well, I think it's very much a part of continuing the thinking process. Collaboration with other people, normally, if you have a work team, you pretty much defined what the work is going to be. We're going to be building a tunnel through that hill over there. So there's a million portions, a million ideas and questions that will have to be answered, starting from that idea of building a tunnel through a mountain, or building a skyscraper on the seashore, or whatever else it is. You start with a vision, and then you burst it into a star field of questions and possibilities and design issues and design possibilities and people that could be involved. How do we find the right architect? Well, there's a universe of architects you can select. Building materials, there's a universe of building materials that you could select. So you constantly are narrowing, you're constantly exploding from a simple idea into a universe of complex parts of it all, or you're coalescing it, shrinking it down to a simple question of what's the main purpose of this building we're going to build, or what do we want people to experience when they walk into the... So every one of these questions is a twinkling possibility with answers that can break out into a million shards and sparkling elements that help define your structure and your job that you're doing. Just as it's a way of physicalizing almost your imagination. Writers start writing a list of ideas that they want, but it still starts with twinkling stars inside our imagination. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about that question you've raised. And so there's a whole litany of things that you want to start to say.
Yeah, exactly. And, even in life and work, structure matters. Like organizing ideas, systems, and relationships, it will lead to better outcomes. Just, you relate it as a writer, you have to be able to organize your ideas for you to be able to publish a book, right? So in order for you...
Of course, right.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how does this concept tie into philosophical or existential questions about our place in the universe?
Well, I think there's something beautiful about imagining that, starting with I hate to use this analogy, but the person who thought of the atomic bomb had an idea, and they went to work on it, and thinking down into this infinitely small spaces of the atom, starting to build what is that atom, and what happens if you split an atom, and what happens if we're in World War II and we need to develop the best weapon that mankind has ever known. And so from the infinitely small realms of the atom, you build out to the massively deadly explosion of an atomic bomb from the power of thought, the power of imagination, but then the imagination discovering the power of the atom and creating world-changing, world-terrorizing experience from starting from the infinitely small to the universally huge topic of an atom bomb. And that's just it's a horrifyingly powerful metaphor for just exactly what we're talking about, starting from the level of the molecule into the influence upon our entire planet.
Yeah, exactly. Now, do you see connections between molecular thinking and artificial intelligence or neuroscience?
Well, I think artificial intelligence is a planetary influence that is only just beginning.
Yeah.
I was just talking with somebody the other day is how much artificial intelligence will affect our schooling system, because when you have an artificial intelligence that can interview a child and determine what it is the child is interested in, what the child's capabilities are, what the child's ability to concentrate is, all of those kind of things, you can imagine an artificial intelligence advisor for every student in the United States or in the world who is saying, what's the point of going to school? Well, sit down at your artificial intelligence computer and ask the computer that. And the computer will be able to say an answer, and then we'll be able to engage every single student starting from that point as to what they want to do, and probably will be intelligent enough. The artificial intelligence will be smart enough to be able to say, well, this child needs this range of questions about sports, or this child needs questions about sailing in boats, or whatever else it is that will engage the attention of that child. And my hope for artificial intelligence and remaking our entire educational system are vast, and the amount of intelligence and inspiration that can be delivered to young children through artificial intelligence, I think, is potentially enormous and unlimited.
Okay. Now, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about molecular structures and their relevance to everyday life?
Well, most people, if you ask them to think about molecules, they say, oh, yawn, don't talk to me about science, I couldn't care less. Well, because they haven't really thought about the importance not just of science to their everyday life, but they haven't really thought about how physical almost their sense of their own imagination can be. If they understood the power of their imagination to go in directions that they deeply care about, if they would only stop to think about it, they have a chance to build a pathway for themselves that nobody else would build, because they're the ones who know what's in their mind. So I think the possibilities of thinking more physically about your own imagination, your own dreams, hopes, and constraints, and family inhibitions or family possibilities, on and on and on, your range of friends that you have, you just start creating it all into a twinkling structure of factors that are important to you in your life. And the question is, how do you maximize the insight that you can gain?
Okay. At the same time, I want to conclude as well that everything interacts at a molecular, level, from chemical reactions to thought processes, and seeing the world as a network of interdependence. It would help us make smarter choices in science, business, or even in life, right? Now, How can adopting this perspective change the way we approach challenges in science and beyond?
Trying to think. I think it's just. I think people have misconceptions about molecular structures because they have perhaps not been educated or just have not been inspired to see their thought processes in a physical way. And I think that that's what my book does try to introduce, is that the way you think about aha moment, that inspiration, aha, I know what I'm going to do now, that kind of a thing. In fact, the current issue of Scientific American is focused on the idea of an aha moment and wants to understand what is the essence of that, what does that come from. And I have been reading the article and trying to get a glimmer of inspiration from it, but I start with the idea of an aha moment because that's where you're particularly intent upon, my goodness, I have just thought of something. But my point is that every single moment of your attention, whether it's you're driving down the street and you suddenly detect a child walking from the sidewalk and maybe getting into the street, or look, you see a billboard, your attention goes like a flitting bumblebee running from one attractive visual element to another, and your attention goes so lickety-split in the space of about 4 seconds, you could think of elements of 5 or 6 ideas that you'd like to dig into. And I'm just saying that with this tool of imagining the twinkle as a model for your attention, for your thought, for the thing that you're focused on, it's a way of alerting you to the physicality almost, that it is physical. It is your brain network of neurons and molecules in your brain and repositories of different thoughts like, oh, my grandma, I'll never forget my grandma. You know, all of those kind of things are in infinitely complex networks in every human brain living on the planet. And every one of them is different. Everyone has a different grandma, whatever. The point is that your brain flits among constant supply of bits of imagination and bits of history and language and mathematical calculation and so on. And I just find thinking like a molecule is a way of physicalizing the kind of things that go on in your head at a microelectronic pulse level. But those ideas that we want to understand and describe are very potent and real to us, and we're able to list them all out in the structure of an essay that we might want to write, or the points of a speech that we want to give, whatever. So it's a route to ask you to think about the ideas that you want to explain or that you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, just as as atoms bond to form molecules and molecules from living organisms, our thoughts and actions combine to create, complex realities. Like I know that even small efforts or ideas, it could always grow into something significant over time.
Of course, that's right. And it's a matter of you feeling that your ideas are important, or perhaps being inspired when a teacher says,
exactly.
A teacher says, Mia, what you just said is a brilliant thing. I've never heard one of my students say something as smart as that. And you're going, what? What did I just say? It's like your attention potentially can be that identifier of your own thoughts. If you have a sense of what your thoughts are you following the flitting of your neurons from one topic to another? And if you have an aha moment, that's when it's obvious, like, oh my God, I'm just so impressed that I just thought of that. But nonetheless, your attention is only rarely flitting to a really dramatic aha moment, but it's nonetheless constantly flitting amongst things. That's right, I've got to go to the store. Oh my goodness, I forgot my my pot is boiling in the kitchen or whatever, your attention goes to things rapid fire. I'm saying stop just long enough to think about what's a thought that I'd really like to have. Well, I'd really like to define my version of what makes me happy. You know, some people don't stop even to tell themselves to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what kind of response have you received from your readers? Have any readers shared unique insights or applications of this idea that surprised you?
I wish I could say that I have found anybody really expressing delight, insight, amazement, or a sense of discovery in their own thinking. I'm pleased to have this chance to explain myself to you because I think that it makes it more express for me. It's been 4 or 5 years almost since I wrote this book, and I read through it, and it feels like a very slight little book, very small. But anytime I get back into it and read it again, I think, gosh darn it, these thoughts are good. And I think probably getting out and being on a lecture circuit people would have more of a chance to hear the passion in my voice that perhaps you're hearing somewhat right now too.
Exactly.
So I think it's getting out to do it in a lecture series is possibly a good idea.
Okay. Now, do you plan to expand on this concept in future books or projects?
Don't know how to do that yet. I have been thinking that, Elon Musk, it's interesting that Elon Musk, who's our advisor to our current president, has got a website that he calls X. And so I would like to write to him and say, I don't know why you chose X, but it seems very close to my idea of a twinkle, which is an idea of every single person's possibility of thinking brilliant new thoughts. And Mr. Musk, I wonder if that's what you mean when you chose X for your website. Are you familiar with what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, it seems like that's really familiar.
That's probably my number one thought is to write a letter to Elon Musk and say, stop thinking about Mr. Trump for a minute. Think about this. Because I have been thinking about your website X. So anyway, that's probably my number one to-do item.
Okay. Now, with this one, what advice would you give to someone interested in applying molecular thinking to their own creative or scientific pursuits?
I would tell them to just pay attention to your paying attention. Pay attention to your thinking process. I think most people do that at some level or other, but pay attention to your thinking process and then challenge yourself. I think of myself as putting a twinkle up in the air. In fact, I have a large-sized twinkle hanging in my light in my room, and it's a Christmas ornament, basically. And I think one of the things that's interesting about Christmas is that Christmas comes just as the earth is turning enough that it's going from the cold of winter around to the upper top part of the earth facing towards the sun, so we'll have more warmth. And Christmas is just the beginning of the possibility of a warm new year. And so I think it's very interesting that we put twinkles and sparkles all over our Christmas trees to celebrate the coming of the new year, of the new possibility of a spring, of a warm season of growth of plants coming out of the ground. So to me, it's a deeply human ritual, Christmas, to say, here comes the sparkle of the sun again in our new year. And so I think of the twinkle as just as rich in meaning as all of the sparkles that we have on our Christmas trees at Christmas time.
Wow. Now, one last question, Chuck. How can readers stay connected with you and your future work?
Oh, how can they stay connected? Well, if I do my job on my website, I have a website called champlinmedia.com, and I should make that much more active because there is a space for people to blog or to put comments onto the website, but also, just using Twitter and using Facebook, and all of those kind of things. I need really a personal secretary to help me make much more use of all of these websites. So, I'm willing to be out there and talk to people, and would love to share my ideas. I hope you detect that I'm somewhat enthusiastic about them.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, thank you so much for participating in this recorded interview, Chuck. I have studied your book at the same time, from the answers that you have, think like a molecule, it would really teach, that small things. Like whether atoms, ideas, or actions, it could combine to create complex and, meaningful structures. And by understanding patterns, adaptability, and the power of cooperation, we can navigate change and unlock creativity. You know, I love the idea on how the book highlights how intelligence emerges from simplicity, how structure determines function, and how interconnected systems shape reality. So it really encourages curiosity, open mindedness, and a scientific approach to problem solving. And by applying molecular thinking, we can better understand innovation, collaboration, and the nature of existence itself, making these lessons valuable for, personal growth, creativity, and progress in various fields. So I'm really thankful that I was able to hear from you, your journey as an author, and more about your book at the same time.